Hey guys, and welcome. Hi guys, and welcome back to part two of our education chat. We've still got Paul with us, who's an education manager from Thames Water. We've got Chris with us, who's a secondary school teacher, and we've got Anya with us, who's a university lecturer. So we kind of talked about kind of what's happened and the impact personally, professionally, how you've kind of adapted to kind of your new way of life and the new norm, so to speak. What I kind of want to know, what I want to get from you guys is what kind of impact you think this will actually have for children. In terms of, we've kind of never had this where you've missed potentially 3 months of term. Obviously, you have been homeschooling and stuff like that, but there is going to be an impact. And what I find quite interesting was, the government were pushing for a month. Everyone comes back for a month because I think they all knew the importance of it. But I think when it wasn't possible, that's the messages has been lost a little bit. But if I start from you, Paul, and I'm thinking more from your children's point of view, because then we can go kind of in age order, and so to speak. But your kind of young children, how do you think it's going to impact them?
So I think, so my eldest is in school. She's in year one. So she's actually recently been able to go back. They were invited back a couple of weeks ago. We decided, our school were doing 2 phases. So we've actually decided she's going back in phase 2, which is going to be on Monday.
Okay.
And I think she's excited. She's ready to go back. I think, yeah, I mean, there's obviously been children that have been there the whole time. There've been lots of kids that haven't been there at all, and there are still some children that aren't going back at all. She's going back part-time. I sort of, the kind of happy-go-lucky part of me thinks, at that age they're resilient. Things change in their lives, and they kind of adapt to them quite quickly. But maybe that's my reflection on my own children, and other children perhaps be more anxious. They actually went to IKEA, went to a shop for the first time today, and I was surprised to hear that actually when they went with their mum, and they were a bit nervous when they were going out to the shops, there's that many people, because we've been going to the supermarket and things like that. They've been at home in our own little bubble, and they're kind of feeling a little bit nervous. My youngest one, though, she's due to start school in September, so we're kind of keeping fingers crossed that she'll be going into a sort of a relatively normal, dare I say it, kind of environment when she starts in September. She's, they've been very close. Just her and her big sister kind of knocking around the house in the garden. They'll perhaps find it a little bit unusual being separate to begin with, but like I say, I trust sort of like the resilience of the youngsters, and
absolutely.
What can seem like big people for us, they sometimes it feels like they're taking their stride.
Yeah. And Chris, I mean, obviously you're kind of at that, you teach that kind of year 7 to 11, to 13. So it's that real vital age of that is when you're kind of learning your real basis, I would say. How do you think it's going to impact kind of children? Have they, do you think it will impact them? Do you think in kind of 10 years we'll look at that age group and think they were really unlucky?
I think it will do. I think, as you say, it's a very important sort of stage in your development in particular. And I think that the fact that they are missing so much school, not just educationally, we're talking sort of emotionally as well, and socially, and that sort of like learning experience. I think for lots of children, it must have had a big impact. As a school, we've tried to sort of get surveys and try and find out how kids are coping, and on the whole, they are, as you say, quite resilient. They do take things in their stride a little bit, but it's surprising how many are actually sort of saying they're missing school a bit. It's gone past the first couple of weeks. Oh yeah, this is a bit of a nice skive. Feels like summer holidays have come early into actually I'm not seeing my friends anymore. The year 10s, the year 12s, well, actually, I'm going to be doing an exam in less than a year's time. What's going on? I've missed a quarter of the year almost in terms of my learning. So I think it's got to have had a big impact on children. They might not always know how to show it or express it, but yeah.
I'm just thinking about sort of also you mentioned your sort of child in year 6, but you think of if year 11s that are leaving, sixth formers that are leaving, they kind
Absolutely.
of that's a magical time. That last week or two is a magical time which they won't get again.
Yeah, absolutely. My niece is in year 11 as well, and she's I mean, she was so upset not to be able to sort of go back and almost do that final goodbye, the old shirt
signs,
the sort of final day of school. And even though she's going back to sixth form to the same place, but it's that final part of year 11. And it is a moment in your life that you do remember. And if you don't get to experience it later on, when other people talk about their experience, you're going to have missed out on it.
Yeah. And what's it like with you? I saw your cat was interested in the education chat as well. But I mean, what's this kind of, what's it been like for you there? Do you think kind of students will ultimately, do you think kind of even grading will be affected this year, next year compared to previous years? Or do you think it's a little bit different when you're that age?
I have to be careful what I say, I suppose. There's most universities put a no detriment policy into play pretty quickly, so nobody would have scored less this year than their average, so it had an impact on motivation for some people to continue to do work. But I have to say the vast majority were very good. But it did have an impact on motivation for some individuals, for sure. We saw a few who were completely demotivated and felt as if their degree, those who were graduating anyway, felt their degree was going to be devalued because of the no detriment policy. But I'm sensing some anxieties coming through now, which are coming in from second year students and first year students mainly. Those that are continuing on with us, so they're the ones that are obviously with us and progressing. And there's just a flicker of anxiety and stress to start. And do you get the odd email now? Can you tell us what's happening? We don't know what's happening yet. And will we be in classes, or will we be online? And so we're waiting for a bit of a directive, as it were, but we are preparing to go online mostly for the first semester, because they are anticipating the second spike, and so they're a bit cautious about any practicals or any sort of practical teaching other than for nursing courses, I think. So
that was actually going to be my next question. It's a good segue, and I'll stay with you, Anya. Like, have you kind of started to look at how social distancing will work, and maybe in the nursing kind of field and stuff, but have you started to look at that and kind of is, broadly looking at September and thinking, okay, if we have to do this, how could we do this?
Yeah, a lot of the bigger universities that you're at, Cambridge and Oxford and Queen's and Belfast, the ones with the deep pockets whose money comes in from research and postgraduate students, they've been able to make that call really quickly to say, yeah, we're going to go online, and this is, there'll be no lectures happening on campus for undergraduates until January, whereas the smaller institutions who are reliant on the undergraduate market, they're really busy at the minute, putting in making the campuses amenable to social distancing, physical distancing, one-way systems. They're making sure that there's, stairways and staircases are one way, and the lifts are, I'm not sure what they're doing with lifts, but and so they'll reduce some touch points. So there'll only be 20 people in a lecture room, for example, if people are still going to do live lectures. So there's an awful lot happening in smaller universities at the minute on campus. The estates teams are all busy making amendments, putting down tape on floors and putting perspex screens in everywhere. But they are preparing to open by September. It's a lot of the smaller HEIs anyway, but yeah.
Yeah, and Chris, what about for you at the Heatham School? I mean, you've obviously got a good one-way system on the stairs, I remember, but generally you must have started looking at how it would work from a practical sense.
Yeah, I mean, the issue we've got, though, is that obviously different things are done by different governments. The government's decision on different things says one thing, and then they change their mind and say something else. We could move to 1 meter distance by September. We could be on a second spike. I know at a sort of senior management level, they started to sort of, obviously, because we're going to have to for logistics, think about September, but there's no way I can see us having a full remit of nearly 2,000 children on the site. It's just, it would be too busy. So same sort of thing at the moment. We've got spaces between the desks. We've actually gone as a school and decided that we're not going to go more than 10 pupils per class. We've only got year 10 in and year 12. And again, that's been staggered starts to the day, staggered ends. They're only in for double periods, so they're not even in for the full day. But again, once you start to bring in the logistics of year 7, 8, 9, year 11 back, year 13 back, all of a sudden it's just, it starts to get a little bit crazy, and you just can't do that.
Yeah, I guess for you, Paul, it's a case of probably not looking at fit education centres at the moment and just thinking online now, is it?
Yeah, I mean, we have actually this past week we have discussed it. We had one inquiry for in the inbox last week, and there's measures we can put in place. I think that from the classroom point of view, while social distancing is in place, we'd be limiting ourselves to 8 to 10 people per classroom on our site. You'd question if it's time well spent for us when we could perhaps engage with audiences in a different way. We can look at hygiene and all that kind of stuff, but I think ultimately, while schools are in the position they're in, I imagine very highly placed on their COVID risk assessment is not having external visitors in and not going on it. So we can sort of tinker with bits and pieces on our sites, but until the confidence is there for schools to take their kids back out on trips, we're probably wasting our time a little bit, to be honest. So I don't think visitors will be returning any time soon, unfortunately. But like I said, we can put our efforts elsewhere where we can have as bigger impact, if not bigger, with engaging online. So that's probably where we're going to be focusing for a while. And the same with volunteers. Getting our volunteers out again. It's more likely to be digitally than I think in the near future.
Yeah. Chris and Anya, I'm kind of interested to hear about sort of the mental health side, and that's been something that's been absolutely, over the last 3 or 4 years, has really got the awareness and the kind of coverage it probably deserves, and the importance it certainly deserves. And I'm sure over the years you've kind of been teaching, you've seen kids, young adults struggle at times. Has something like this obviously has made it a lot more difficult, but from your perspective, how hard is it that when that student has a tendency to sometimes maybe struggle slightly, you may offer them more support, but you can't see them at the moment and stuff like that? And then I guess, ultimately, what advice would you give people watching who may have children that are struggling a little bit at home? I'll go to Chris first.
I was going to say, I think it obviously has had a big impact. We've been talking for years and years about trying to get children offline and off gadgets. And all of a sudden, what have we been doing? We've been telling them to get online and get on gadgets. And I think it is that social interaction is so important, and that's one of the great things about schools. Children get to mix with so many different sort of groups of children. So I think that the mental health side it obviously has had a big impact. For me personally, as a school, we've been trying to sort of make contact with pupils, those that might be in a more vulnerable situation, those we might know that are struggling. We've tried to make phone calls home. We've spoken with parents as well. We've sent out sort of guides and not self-help books in a way, but sort of websites, video links, advice and guidance, like exercise being really good, trying to get a routine, all of those types of things. For me personally, I would be saying that if parents are struggling, to ask for help. There are so many good places out there, starting with your school, because schools are, as you say, over the last 3 or 4 years, starting to open up a conversation about mental health, wanting pupils to talk about it more, being more open. And so really parents can engage with the school, I think would be a really good start. Unfortunately, not all parents do that or can do that. So school, it's a two-way process, is what I'm trying to say. And I think that's something that's really important, that schools are more willing to listen. I've been teaching a long time, and I've seen a big difference in the last 4 or 5 years with schools' awareness of mental health and I suppose their willingness to want to be involved.
Yeah. Anya, any thoughts on the subject?
There's an awful lot more awareness, as Chris says, around mental health issues amongst undergraduate students, and there's certainly a higher level of tolerance, I would say, amongst the teaching staff around anxiety and depression, for example. And we are seeing many more students come forward, requesting extenuating circumstances on the basis of anxiety and depression, for example, and stress. And we've had quite a few cases in the lockdown period as well, of students who have become quite stressed because of just being anxious about the world and life, and then being given a month's extension to do a piece of work that, I don't think the extensions helped a lot of people either. It just prolonged the agony, as it were. There's a lot of money going into research for the impact of the COVID-19 lockdown on mental health, and that'll be the 4th wave they're predicting. So they're expecting this second spike, and then next year for there to be a mental health epidemic as an outcome of all of this.
Yeah, I mean, obviously with the economy and stuff, there's, we are looking at sort of a real tough financial, which is one of the biggest factors of mental health, obviously, dealing with finances. I guess final question for kind of all of you is what kind of advice do you have for students that are I know it's sort of, we're going to the end of term now a little bit, there's not too long left, sort of a month or so left, but generally what advice would you give to students right now and then in September if they are forced to kind of study online? And also what kind of tips would you give to parents, I guess, just to kind of deal with it, help their children and help themselves, I guess? Paul, come to you first as a kind of dad of 2 and also working, you used to be a teacher as well.
I mean, I'm probably, talking from personal
that's fine,
and working with the team I work with, lots of young kids, and I've over the past few months I've seen the pressures we've put on ourselves, the pressures we put on our kids. You can only do your best, and I think some of the expectations that we've put on ourselves have been too much sometimes. So it's perhaps a lesson we've slowly been learning over the past few months, but no one's superhuman. We all have our sort of frailties, and we have to do our best and reach out for help where we can.
Just on that, I mean, I've got young people in my family, and I've sort of made sure I've just been checking in with them sort of weekly and stuff like that, and even talked to some parents and stuff like that, because it's I think me and you, Paul, were talking about it earlier, but it's different if you were the only one at home. It will be different to the fact that everyone's at home. And I think there is, I mean, Anna, you kind of mentioned it a little bit as well, that some people aren't putting their cameras on because maybe they don't want to, show their background or show their stuff. And I think it could be the same thing for, even parents feeling that as well, that just, the amount of pressure. I mean, I obviously do a lot of work in football, and I always use the football shirts as an example. 60, 70 pounds football shirts. The pressure on parents to buy them every year is unreal. It's just unfair, and it just isn't right in my opinion. So that whole background, what device they're using, what they're wearing. Suddenly you don't have school uniform. You suddenly have to wear your own clothes. So is there this? When you're young, do you want a brand name? And so I've been kind of helping people with that, and I guess that's a real big factor as well. And that's been my advice to people. But yeah, sorry, Anya, do you want to sort of go next?
Oh God,
Just on advice to students, advice to parents.
Keep in touch as much as possible over the summer period, so you don't lose the connections that you have with your peer group. That's really important, and there are plenty of safe spaces online to do that. And like, it depends on the subjects that you're studying, I suppose. And I suppose I'm lucky in the sense, you know, I teach sports management, and I'm able to sort of push platforms like Strava and get students to connect with each other, and support each other on, you know, running, cycling at the moment in that way, and using LinkedIn. I don't know, did you track me down on LinkedIn, Akhil, or was it Twitter?
Twitter, yeah. I followed you since I left Hertfordshire.
I'm just on them all the time at the minute. I can't remember, but yeah, I constantly advise students to, you know, connect with staff and, you know, their peers on LinkedIn particularly, and then there are other safe places to go to online as well, and just keep in touch.
Chris, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, starting like with parents, I agree with Paul. I think there's so much pressure to, sometimes you see things online that these parents doing this and they're reading this book and they're doing this and they're making their kids do that. And I think for parents, sometimes it can feel like you're not doing a good job, when in reality you are doing a good job. I think sometimes that parents have a feeling that they're not doing a good job, but actually the lockdown's affecting everybody. So not being so hard on yourself as a parent. Homeschooling is entirely new for everybody. It's a difficult thing to do. The work that's being set might not always be the most exciting, but teachers are sort of firefighting with so many different year groups. For pupils, I think it's that thing of being connected to friends and family, and also having a bit of a sense of a routine, because you can get into, especially for the sort of maybe 15, 16-year-olds, in particular year 11, that think, well, there's nothing happening until September, and this was almost back in May time. Having a routine, getting up, not necessarily saying getting up and starting work, but just getting up at a sort of set time throughout the week, trying to go out and do some physical activities. Your mental health, this is regularly what I'm writing to my tutor group. Your mental health is just as important as your academic health. They fit together. So it's also about, yes, keeping an eye on your academic studies, but not to the extent you're ignoring everything else. And for me, that's really important. You know, it's as I say, for parents, it is that thing of not beating yourself up, not worrying too much that you're not doing a good job with it. Just keeping those lines of communication. That is always difficult with children, especially the age group we're teaching, who don't always want to communicate with their parents. Keeping that communication there.
I guess it's also, I suppose, encouraging them to have their own support groups, maybe with other parents, and, you know, continuing to let the children, maybe, you know, they're obviously on calls in class, but they also need, I mean, it's something we've been doing at work. You know, what we were finding a month into lockdown was all our video calls were work related. Those chats we were having around the coffee machine, the lunchtime, the desks, we weren't having. So we've put in sessions actually just to talk about topical things. I think it's the same with children. They're not getting those play times, those chill out times, those walking to lectures or chilling out in the evenings or whatever it is. I think it's important to find those times as well. And I guess for parents too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think children need that sort of, it's that social side that I talked about earlier, that schools and different academic institutions provide. And as you say, it's not just for children, it's for adults as well. Parents being able to let off a bit of steam and talk to other parents.
Yeah, cool. Okay, I think that's really good advice. I think that's honest as well. Hopefully this will sort of help people. If there are any kind of questions from anyone watching, then obviously, you know, do feel free to drop me a note, and I'll certainly try and answer them via my three colleagues here. And I think, you know, as everyone's mentioned, there are lots of materials out there. Do use them. You know, a simple Google search and you'll find lots of supporting materials. I think that's important as well. So what I really like is your advice, Chris, at the end, that, you know, you may think you're not doing a good job, but I bet you are. So just, be positive, keep smiling, and keep supporting each other. So guys, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. I know it's as you say, the education sector's got kind of, it's had people absolutely praising them. It's also had people thinking, God, they've been closed for 3 months, they must have had a good time. But yeah, I think it's been anything but easy. So well done, keep going. Nearly there for the summer holidays when you still have your children too and stuff like that. But
you may be open.
But well, yeah, exactly. And yeah, cool. Thank you guys. Stay safe and enjoy the rest of the week.
Well done. Thank you.
Thank you.